So one thing, so the YAB really wanted to talk about was landlords, and that's because during our last YAB meeting, I brought up, I kind of updated the YAB on the CYFD MFA collaboration for that landlord collaboration program that I know all of us providers were super, super pumped about because it's revolutionary for what we do, and it's going to be a huge step in housing and success stories, you know? And one thing we were kind of talking about is this fear of landlords that us as youth, particularly youth who have experienced homelessness, feel is that we're kind of terrified of our landlords. And it's something that I almost feel like doesn't get enough recognition, and I guess. So I kind of just wanted to have a dialogue about landlord interactions.
Hi, yeah, this is Tracy. I work with 3 separate landlords, and it hasn't been an issue because the landlords are really, in our case, the landlords are really just sort of like the middleman from the property owner and us, and so, or the tenant. And so where I kind of have, it's nice to have that landlord be that middle person, because sometimes the property owners just don't have a lot of tolerance. And so the landlord, the way we do it here, the way I've been doing it here, the landlord is kind of like that middle person that I can communicate with, or the tenant can communicate with, to sort of soften the situation. So I don't really know kind of the direction you wanted to go, Maya, with the discussion about landlords, but fortunately for me, I have that opportunity to see landlords as the middle person and not that fear that you talk about. I think that's really more tied to the property owner themselves, in my case.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Hannah. Oh, sorry, Maya. Sorry.
No, no, I'm sure you're
Okay.
going to say something very valuable. Go for it.
Yeah, so no, I just wanted to go off of what Tracy just said with the fear. So I know in my case, I do have a lot of fear in regards to my landlord. In that past YAB meeting, I had talked about how my washer and dryer haven't worked since I moved in, and I don't understand. I was never taught how to read a lease. So looking back at my lease, I didn't really understand any of the terminology within the lease. So I didn't really know that a working washer and dryer was part of the lease. And I believe Forrest was the one who brought that up to me in the YAB meeting. And I recently reached out to my landlord saying, hey, I reread my lease. It says that I should have a working washer and dryer, but that was something I was very scared to do, in fear that, oh, she'll get mad at me and she will kick me out, or she will just get frustrated with me. And I was very, very fearful of that. And I think the fear is that they have the power to do something, or it seems like they have the power to do something, because in school we were never really taught how to read a lease or how to understand your rights. At least I wasn't. It was something I was never taught. So I think that's where a lot of the fear is based off of, is not understanding what your rights are, and they are not. At least that's how it is in my case.
Hannah, I think that is a really good point. I do know that at times clients are scared to just ask the landlord a question if something is not working. And I think the one thing I always try to convey to our clients is the rent is being paid, and that is really their responsibility, if it is in the lease, to maintain. And sometimes I see clients won't reach out to the landlord if their air conditioning isn't working, and I'll meet with them and say, oh my gosh, how long has this been going on? And they say, oh, probably like a couple weeks. But I try to make sure that clients are empowered enough to know that they have that right to communicate that to the landlord, and the landlord has a responsibility to repair that. So I think you're right, Hannah, that education really hasn't been out there, and we just need to make sure as program providers that we encourage clients to have a voice and know that their voice is very significant.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of it is the education aspect of it because in school you aren't taught these things that you need to know when you are renting for the first time. I know I received a little bit of help when I got my first apartment from the navigation program at Growing Up New Mexico. I reached out to them and they had a lot of information for me about um, making a lease, going over a lease, even taxes, because taxes were another thing I really never learned about in school. So I know that there definitely are programs, but I think that it should be more accessible and more known, is my opinion. Because yeah, coming out of high school, I had no idea. I had no idea how to do any of this kind of stuff, especially read a lease. So I think it would be really cool if there was something out there that was more known, so that people coming out of high school or coming out of a situation of homelessness know how to take the steps to get a house and read a lease and all of that.
Yeah, when we had the YAB meeting about landlords, it kind of just made me think, like, I guess this is somewhat of like a blind spot for us in a sense, as people who are putting people into houses. I feel like almost we have this responsibility to make sure that they do understand everything in their lease and that they do understand their rights. Um, and I just kind of was really amazed to think, like, oh, maybe we aren't doing all that we can to make sure that they're successful in this situation. And that's why I think programs like this landlord collaboration thing are so important and innovative, and that's the direction that we should be going into. And I was kind of curious, for those of you who work with like Star and things like that, do you guys have programs that go over leases and landlord interactions?
Good morning. My name is Janaea. I work with Youth Shelters and Family Services Department. I was a service coordinator with the STAR program and recently actually just started as a landlord liaison that does work with CYFD and MFA. One thing that I can say as a service coordinator, when we do our lease signing, we do sit down with the client as well as, the landlord to go over the lease agreement and just let them know that it is okay to ask any kind of questions that you feel, you may need. We also do encourage them to reach out to the landlord. However, one thing that I have noticed a lot lately that has been coming up is the fear of reaching out to landlords because they are afraid that it's going to be like, well, this is what it's going to cost. You have to pay for this, you damage that. And I believe what I've come across was the fear of having to pay for damages that may have occurred. So with the landlord liaison, one thing that I do is I reach out to landlords just to kind of see how it's going with tenants. We encourage our tenants to inform the landlord of any damages that may have occurred, any broken air conditioners that you had mentioned, washer dryers. I will link the information for the landlord collaboration program in the chat. And I did want to review, if we have a little bit of time, just kind of give a little bit of information about the collaboration program. What our program is we did start to collaborate with CYFD as well as MFA. Our program is designed to help with any damages that may occur when a tenant is in a house. We do have up to $2,500 to, help with damages. So some of the claims that we've seen were houses being broken into, broken windows, broken doors because of it. So any damages that go over the deposit. So whether a tenant's still living in there, our biggest goal is to help prevent eviction. Secondly, we do have what's called a vacancy loss. So say a client moves out and the damages exceed the deposit, we help pay for those damages, but the repairs take over a month to complete. We can pay that landlord a month of vacancy loss, which would kind of help with that month that they lost having to repair their unit. Additionally, we do have a fund up to $1,000 to help, if we reach out to a landlord, they have a rental, but the rental doesn't necessarily meet HUD standards. We have $1,000 to be able to help that landlord do the repairs or upgrades that are needed to meet HUD standards. And then we have a flex fund, which is, anything that may not be covered under those three things, kind of helps us just have a little bit of fund available to kind of not necessarily play with, but things that may not be covered. And our biggest hopes are to get more landlords to be able to, have the opportunity to house youth. But we also would like to be able to take that pressure off of our clients, and that fear of being told, well, this is what it's going to cost. So we encourage our clients, reach out to your service coordinator if there's a broken window, if there's a broken air conditioner. Reach out to your service coordinators. The service coordinators will reach out to me, and I'll also put the information, my email and phone number, as well as the other two landlord liaisons and what counties we cover. Reach out to them if you have any questions. And then as well as the MFA website giving information has all of that as well. So if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thanks, Janaea. I will say we worked with Janaea on a case where we had some damage to two separate apartments, and the best part about that is I stepped out of it, and Janaea and the landlord worked directly together, and the landlord submits everything, and so it was really helpful because I didn't have to kind of relay back and forth. So just a plug there for that program because we've used it.
I'm going to go ahead and speak up. Yeah, I think that one thing with this whole landlord fear thing is that it's big and it's prevalent, because I even feel it. I've been stably housed with CISO for about 4 years now. But I do have that lived experience of being homeless before that. And I still am terrified of my landlord. And I think it's because of that fear of, like, this person has the power to make me homeless again. And I think that's something that's kind of goes through the minds of anybody who's freshly being housed, because that transition from unhoused to housed is really big. And I feel like a lot of people who are going through that transition have the fear that they're going to mess it up somehow and they're going to be back at square one. And I think it's a fear that weighs more heavy on their minds than we even give credit to. I still have that fear. If I have a guest over, I'm like, am I going to get in trouble because I have somebody here? If I'm playing my music, I'm like, is this too loud? Am I going to get kicked out because of this? And maybe that's irrational, but for me, it's that fear of, I could be back at square one. I could be homeless again if I mess this up, and I really don't want to do that. And so I just kind of wanted to give acknowledgement to that fear, because I know in the YAB meeting, we were all kind of saying, yes, this is scary. This is a weird power dynamic, and I don't feel I have the upper hand. So it's awesome to hear that there are resources, because you do essentially, as a tenant, have these rights, and you do kind of have the upper hand because you have rights as a tenant. So I just think this conversation is really important, and I think it should be had with more youth who are going into these programs.
Also, too, if I may add something, even making some sort of agreement, not just the landlords, but an agreement with if you're rooming with somebody and you're a roommate, and you're it's like you're sharing a lease, it's good to have some sort of agreement just between you and your roommate too. I've experienced and I've seen lots of really bad stories with that, with people ending up back on the streets just because they didn't get along with their roommate, or or whatever was going on, because there is no agreement set up at the beginning to making boundaries. Like the boundaries were, there was a bunch of unspoken boundaries. It's good to like bring those out into the open and know it's okay with like the person that you're sharing space with. Cause yeah, I mean, like landlords are a problem, but if you're sharing a space with people, like you're not dealing with the landlord every day, you're dealing with like the person that you're living with every day. And, and everyone's got different needs and wants. I mean, they're all generally the same, but anyway, yeah, I think that's really important too, to like just get a good agreement between you and the roommate. I've had bad experience. I've seen bad experiences with that. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
If I could add to that, Alistair, I think, and some of this circles back to that landlord kind of relationship of like, how do you communicate those needs and those those issues that do come up, and maybe there needs to be a little bit of a support that, like, as far as like almost a class to be like, well, maybe this is the best way to communicate, whether that's in a landlord situation or a roommate situation. Communicate your needs, and also communicate, I guess, clearly between the two before any of those conflicts do arise. And I think with a landlord, and speaking from my own experience, coming up and having some of those same similar kind of anxiety kind of inducing feelings around just having a conversation with the landlord, and whether you're like 2 days late on your rent and you feel that anxiety of, well, I can't make it, and if they're calling me, do I want to answer the phone and tell them that I'm going to be 2 days late? Is it better to do that, or should I just avoid that conversation? And I remember having those feelings when I was younger and less stable, and thinking it's easier just to avoid that. But in the long run, it's not, because it creates and builds this like almost push and pull between the landlord and the tenant that says, oh, it's another month. Are they going to be late? And then there's this this feeling of like having to pull teeth to get the rent. But I think if that open communication is there from the beginning, and there's a level of understanding between the two, I think that makes things easier in the long run. And I didn't have that skill set. I'm speaking for myself, and I don't know how that skill set is built, other than just like kind of making it an easy opportunity to say that this is not somebody to be afraid of. Let them know what's going on. And the same with a roommate as well, is like, let's talk about it first, and we all have these shared expectations, and then we know how to deal with this conflict when it does come up, and it's not something that's kind of festering.
I think that's a very good point, Forrest. One other thing I would like to add is visitors. Just, just being aware that you are responsible for your visitors and the actions or damages that may be caused. I think one thing that comes up a lot is when there is kind of a problem or miscommunication with the landlord, it's usually involving visitors, and tenants are saying, well, it wasn't me, it was somebody that I had over. Just realizing that we are responsible for anybody that comes to visit. Any damages or loud noises that they may bring, but also parking and whatever the issue may be, just realizing that we are responsible for our visitors and letting them know, hey, I'm not allowed to do that. Kind of putting up the boundaries, kind of like the same way we would as far as our roommates.
Absolutely. And I have a lot of sympathy with the visitor thing, because, and as I was saying before, that transition from unhoused to housed is so different and scary. And I think it's a really hard terrain for young people to navigate. From my own experience, when I was homeless, I was camping with up to 10 people, and we had our camp, and like I was essentially rooming with 10 people because our camp was a big group and we were loud, and some of them were older and some of them were using illicit substances, and it was just this big, you know, crazy friend group that we were living together. And then when I was housed, I was like, I can't have that same situation in my house, but now I'm lonely because I've grown so used to having so many people around me all the time, that it was kind of it was rough for me at first. And yeah, when I got my first house, I did get letters on my door like, be quiet, why are all these people here, why are there sketchy people parking in my spot? And I didn't care at that point in time, but now that I reflect back on that, I'm like, wow, Maya, what were you doing? And it's just putting myself back in that mindset of like, I was scared and I was alone, and I wanted to surround myself with that similar comfortability of having a lot of people around. So I think it is really important that we maybe like, one idea that the YAB has come up with is have like a video series for youth going into housing with some of the do's and don'ts, and maybe some people telling their cautionary tales, of like, I know you're feeling this way, but this is why you should avoid that.
I think that video series sounds great. I would look forward to that, to seeing that.
Yeah, I really liked what you said too, Maya, about like just being, you know, stuck in like or just used to old ways, and like wanting to like continue that with like the new with the new experience of being housed, and wanting to bring all your friends along with you. I think that's very valid, and a really difficult like obstacle for people. So like, I don't know, I'd like you to go more into that. Like, how did you find like a balance with that, and what worked, what didn't work, and what would you do differently?
Absolutely. So with my own experience, you know, so I didn't go through a housing program. I was too young to apply when I was under 18, during the majority of my time being homeless. So I got housed on my own. So I didn't really have, you know, the case manager telling me like, you can't do this. I just kind of got thrown into the situation like, oh, I've got a house now. And it took me getting kicked out of that house to realize this isn't going great for me. And then I was homeless again and realized like, well, I kind of put myself in this position, and it took a lot of like self-reflection. But for other people, I think it's important, just, you know, knowledge is power. So if we can do this video series and kind of convey like, this is what happened to me, and I completely validate and understand why you're doing these things, why you're bringing people over, why you're doing whatever you're doing. But I think it's really important to make sure that the consequences are very prevalent and very known, because, you know, I was in my head, I was 18 and I was like, yeah, so what, I get kicked out, who cares? But reflecting back now, that's on my renter's history, and, you know, and I still drive by those apartments like, oof, I really messed up over there. And it kind of just weighs on my head too, of like, that wasn't my best time, that wasn't me being my best self, that wasn't me making good decisions. So I think essentially it's just knowledge is power, and as if we can just educate people who are going into these programs and also validate their feelings, I think that's really the goal, I guess.
Cool, thank you. Something else I just wanted to say real quick too, is that I don't know, I've looked at like the housing roster, and it's like a 2-year wait. How long is like the wait to like get into subsidized housing? I mean, in Santa Fe, I know it's like 2-year wait or something like that. Is there any update on that?
Is there, do you mean like Section 8? Is that the subsidy that you're speaking of?
Yeah. Section 8. I just heard recently it's like 2-year wait or something like that. What are we doing for the people that are waiting? Is there like anything offered for those people?
With the CARES Act and the funding that was provided through that, there were some options, but unfortunately, a lot of that funding has ceased to be available. So yeah, there is actually, until the end of this year, there's emergency housing vouchers that are available. And I'm they're being utilized throughout the state of New Mexico.
Mhm.
And those they're like, it's almost like extra Section 8 placements that were made available. So there is a little bit more than previous, and I think that's because of the pandemic. But there's still, like you said, that demand is so high. And then even when folks do get the vouchers, there's an issue with finding units and landlords that are willing to work with those vouchers and willing to accept them. And there is quite a stigma attached. And so that's another hurdle to overcome, just beyond, even if somebody gets into that program and they get the voucher in hand, finding a unit and it takes time. It takes a long time once those people are accepted. So unfortunately, there's a lot of obstacles still. And I don't have an update as far as like what the actual waiting list is looking like. And that would be like individual housing authorities or the counties that you're looking at. You can call, and a lot of times they only open up, like I think Bernalillo County just opened up their applications, and it's like this 1 month span where the application process is even open, and then you have to wait a whole nother year, a whole nother cycle before you can even apply. And so some of those systems and the way that they're set up, it's like bottlenecked. So it's very difficult to get in. And unfortunately, I don't have too many answers on that. But we can invite somebody from the housing authority, and they can maybe share a little more insight if you'd like to learn more about it.
Yeah, that would be really good. It sucks how long of a wait it is, because it's like, I don't know, that's a long time to wait for somebody that is housed for something. And I just know it's like there's more and more people in the world. So it's like housing's tough to find for, people that can even afford it. Really cool to do some like brainstorming and stuff of like how we can make housing more available. I've been, I know like the price of wood has gone way up, and like it's not cheap to build a house. It's not cheap for land. There's got to be like some like solution. I know there's not going to be like a one fix all type thing, but I think it'd be really good to start brainstorming on different ways that we could maybe even create more housing opportunities. If there's any way we could like get grants or funding to, build just a Section 8, apartment complex or something like that. I know it's like not really that easy just to say, or easy to do, easier to say. But yeah, we got to start coming up with some sort of solutions, because they're like waiting 2 years to get into a house. It's like a lot can happen. I mean, people are like dropping like flies out there with all this stuff going on, and then they have like pandemic to deal with and alienation and just all this crazy stuff.
Tracy, I saw you unmute during that. Was there something you wanted to add to that?
No, I was just going to say that, our public housing offices have not only obviously the vouchers for public housing, but they have vouchers with CYFD. They have the VASH vouchers for veterans. And so they have quite a few options that can ultimately sort of negate the long wait list. It's not just a one time or one entry and that's your list. There's kind of a few other creative opportunities that public housing uses. And so I think that's a great idea, maybe to invite somebody from public housing to attend a meeting, just to kind of share with all of us the other opportunities that they have for placing individuals in public housing.
Yeah, I think we could all definitely learn a lot from hearing about more options, hearing what's being done. Because I do think that these long wait lists are essentially a barrier for people staying in our programs and staying in contact. I can't tell you how many clients I've called and been like, hey, so like I was hoping to get an update on your situation. And they just say, well, I stopped calling because like nothing's gonna happen. Or the last person I talked to said I was on a wait list, but I was number 100 and something. So I think this is actually a huge barrier that we could learn a lot from if we talk to some of the people in these other programs.
And I think because Dana is here now, if somebody is enrolled in public school, there are other options that are outside of the availability for somebody else that's not in the public school system or their children. So maybe Dana, you can explain a little bit about that McKinney Vento funding and what is currently available.
All right, so there's currently 3 funding cycles under my program that are providing, funding for our students in schools. And so the Education for Homeless Children and Youth sub-grant is the only funding currently available for our students. And it helps with all the kinds of educational needs, like, making sure they have clothing and hygiene products and stuff like that for school, any kind of school supplies they might need, transportation, making sure that they're enrolled immediately, making sure they have access to after school programming, summer school, credit recovery, all those kinds of things like that. And so we have some additional funding from the American Rescue Plan. Unfortunately, the schools don't have access to it, and they probably won't have access to it until October, because we, they submit all of their things that they paid for to us, and they're called requests for reimbursements. And so we have to make sure all of those are completely cleared out by our business office before we can award them with their carryover funds. And so, but those funds are really a lot more flexible. And so some of the things that they can do are like put our families or our students in hotels, like kind of like a little Band-Aid until we can kind of get them into something more permanent. It can probably work for maybe up to a couple of weeks. They can use prepaid debit cards. They can purchase unaccompanied youth cell phones so that they can keep in touch with them, and they have hotspots. Everything that, and community-based organizations, there's a lot of focus on partnering with community-based organizations for wraparound services. So it's good news that we have some additional funding. It's bad news that schools actually don't have access to it and won't have access to it until sometime in October. Is that what you wanted, Forrest? Or did I spin off in a different direction?
No, that kind of explains. And because even for myself, I was just working with a client who was able to access hotel rooms in Las Vegas, and because of that, through the school system. So there is some availability. I guess it might be depending on the demand in the community of what was left over from last year, possibly. But yeah, I think it's important to know that those even if it's like you said, the cell phone or any kind of assistance that is available to somebody who's struggling, I think every little bit helps, and I appreciate that you did share that. And I don't know if there's any other questions from anybody else about what that is and why or when in October, when it'll be able to be utilized, and how also to access that.
So I want to make sure you understand that does not mean that schools don't have funding to help our students, and it doesn't mean that they don't still have the legal obligation to do that. So they have additional funding. So what we're telling them to do is maybe use your Title I homeless set-aside funding, or other ESSER funding, or Title IV funding, or general funds. And then when they do get the funds, then they can move those fundings to the right funding source. Called a journal entry. But anyway, so schools still have funding to help our students with everything we talked about, except for maybe the hotels and prepaid debit cards. And they still have the legal obligation to provide all of those things to our students.
So are these tax dollars? Where is this funding coming from?
This is federal funding. So it comes from the U.S. Department of Education. What's
like the age bracket with that then?
So it is preschool all the way through 12th grade. And it doesn't, there's no age limit. Technically, we could all go back to school if we wanted to. The only age limit is regarding special education and the services they receive.
Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome. And I think one thing that really sticks out to me whenever I hear about one of these really cool, so sorry about my daughter, one of these really cool resources is I'm thinking, how does somebody who wants to utilize these resources find out about them?
So every school district in the whole entire state and every state charter school has a homeless liaison. They all have to designate somebody to be the homeless liaison. And so that person is the only person in the school system who can make the determination if a student is Mckinney Vento eligible or not. And so it's vitally important to get them connected to the homeless liaison. And we have their contact information on our website for the Education Homeless Children and Youth on PED's website. And I'll put the link in the chat in just a minute. Because the homeless liaison's job is to make sure all of this, you know, that they're getting connected with all of the educational services they need within the schools, and then also to be linked with our community partners like you guys to help us handle the other things like housing, food insecurity, mental health, all the other stuff that we don't do in the schools.
This is Tracy. I'll just add another piece to that. I work closely with the homeless liaisons here in Farmington, and just the last three referrals we've had and actually housed came from the homeless liaisons. And it's actually a really nice relationship because they're actually going out, they're giving clients vouchers for transportation, for public transportation, and assisting in ways that perhaps I cannot. And so it's a great partnership. Probably the only downside to it that I will say is it's on the school, the homeless liaisons work on the school schedule. So during the summer months, it's not a resource that we have. Unfortunately, it'd be nice if that could be extended out. And I don't know, Dana, perhaps there's something I'm missing there, but that is one thing that I've always needed a homeless liaison, and seems like in the summer.
Yeah, and that's the thing, every LEA has local autonomy and local authority, so they kind of can do whatever they want to do, and that is a challenge. So maybe because there's a gap in services during that time, that's something that we could all talk about together and seeing how we can make sure that at least somebody is there, that if it's not going to be the social worker because their contract's not going during the summertime, that they've identified somebody else to serve as the homeless liaison during that time, and they know what to do.
That would actually be super helpful. And if, you know, I would imagine that the schools could probably designate somebody that's around the calendar, but maybe that can be something you can talk about at one of your next meetings or something. But yeah, I've really appreciated the homeless liaisons here in San Juan County. So thank you.
Yeah, you all do a great job. I really love the community that you guys have created all together there. I mean, you all are basically so close together. So, you know, I mean, you all do wonderful work there. And I'm so thankful for, you know, your teamwork and your camaraderie and coordination. It makes a difference. I think it's a huge difference. Yeah, it's really hard to think about your education if you're just trying to think about how to survive. So yeah, it's a natural partnership for sure. It's really thinking about the whole child.
So is there like what kind of standards are held for these kids? Like, do they have to have like a certain like grade average to like keep getting in or getting the vouchers, stuff like that?
No. Once that homeless liaison makes contact with that student or family, you know, they're going to make sure that they fit in our definition, because it's a little bit broader than HUD's definition, and it includes, you know, our families and students that are living in hotels and motels and that are living doubled up, you know, because primarily that's where most of our students are going to be living, in a doubled up situation, because there's not a lot of shelters or different, you know, housing opportunities for them in rural New Mexico. So, I mean, and besides that, when we hit a crisis, we all do the same thing. We want to be with people who care about us. So, you know, while we're going through something really horrible. So, so once the homeless liaison identifies them, and they'll do an assessment with them, a needs assessment to see, you know, what they need within the school system. You know, maybe they have special needs and they need an IEP set up or something like that, or, you know, they have their ELL student or something. They'll get them connected with everything that they need within the school system. They'll get them enrolled immediately. They'll make sure that the homeless liaison's job is to get that enrollment paperwork that's required, because we don't want our kids, you know, they've already been out of school more than we want them to, considering the situations that they're in. So the idea is to get them in school, and then we'll figure everything else out later. So, you know, we definitely want to make sure that they're set up for free meals that the schools are serving, because that's an educational right that our students have. We want to make sure that transportation set up, and something that you guys might not be aware of is that school districts can actually reimburse families and students that have vehicles for transportation to and from school. That's a really great alternative that a lot of schools like. I talked about immediate enrollment. That's an educational right that our students have. So we want to get them in school immediately. Transportation, gosh, I'm thinking all of this in the top of my head here. Oh, access to and participation in everything that the school offers, because we want to make sure that our students are having the same educational experience as, you know, their stably housed peers. So again, it's just making sure that all those things are in place. You know, if there's after school programming, that our kids are able to, you know, participate in that, because the schools have either waived those costs or covered those costs. We want to make sure that they're on their road to graduate. And so if credit recovery is a piece of that, if summer school is a piece of that, then that's why we want to take care of tutoring, homework assistance. Oh gosh, I'm leaving a lot of different things out, but
how to read a lease.
What's that?
No.
How to read a lease.
Yeah, that life skills. I heard that we recently passed something where life skills are going to be courses are going to be taught in high schools again. So I think that's great. That's definitely needed. I mean, it's hard to figure that stuff out anyway.
Yeah, that'd be helpful, because we go to like school and, you know, I don't know. That'd be super helpful. But I also, like, one last thing, I think I had one last thing was, I know it's only like in 2 states, but like most schools, and, you know, I think it's good that we were able to express our opinions and express our like free will and stuff. But I hear there's only like 2 states where they're like allowing kids not to get vaccinated and go to school. I think, like, I'm just curious what's up with that. Like, because I know people that, you know, they don't want to put their kids in school because they don't want their kids, you know, getting pumped up with juices from needles and stuff like that, whether it's good or not. You know, they don't want that happening, so they're feeling really timid about even putting their kid in school because of that. And I know there's like a couple states like Oklahoma and Texas where they're not enforcing that. Is that gonna happen here too, or is it gonna be like pushed on everybody to or enforced to get vaccinated before you can go to school?
You know, I really don't know how to answer that question. That's really a big question. I don't know that I've heard anything about that. But what I can tell you for Mckinney Vento, excuse me, for Mckinney Vento students is that they have to be enrolled immediately, even if they don't have their immunization records with them, because that then becomes the homeless liaison's job to get those immunizations records. And if they don't have them, to get them connected or whatever the situation is. But that can't be a reason why schools don't let our students in.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's the reason why I haven't gone back to college, is because it's like required to like have a vaccination. So it's like, you know, and then I just get frustrated, and then I just don't like all the obstacles. So I'm just like, screw it, I'm not going to go back to school. That's what I'm experiencing, you know, myself. But I also know other people and like family members too, that like they don't want their kid to be immunized, because like, I mean, I think our human bodies are pretty perfect at the way they are. That's just my opinion. But you know, other people share that as well. So it's
I would love for
something to be
you to
addressed.
email me that. That's something that we haven't talked about yet, and we're working with higher education right now to try to make it a smoother transition for students when they go to college or get, you know, go on to higher education. So if you could share that information, I just put my email over in the chat for you. I wasn't aware that that was a barrier, because we definitely want to make sure our students that have, you know, that graduate and want to go on to higher education have what they need to be able to do that. And that is not a challenge I've heard so far.
Awesome. I love the collaboration happening in here. That's incredible. We do only have about 2 minutes left. This meeting flew by. One final request we had from the YAB members was about recruiting new members, and I'm going to go ahead and let one of our YAB members, Hannah, kind of talk to you guys about that.
Yeah, I know that I've only started joining YAB recently. I really, really enjoy being part of every meeting. I really, really like hearing how everybody's thoughts like come together and create like this one big idea. I think it's super, super great. I think it would be amazing to hear more voices in YAB, definitely. And I think it's mostly getting the word out there. Like, for example, I was introduced to YAB by Maya, and I'm so grateful that she did. But I think it would be cool to like kind of promote it a little bit more, whether that be through social media, because I know that's a very huge outlet for the youth right now, or school, or even word of mouth, like I heard about it. But advocating for YAB a little bit more, so the young people know that it's like a safe environment for them to come and talk about stuff like, oh, I'm afraid to speak to my landlord, or I don't know how to do this, or all the different examples that may be out there. But just to get it out there a little bit more, so that it's known that there's a safe place for people to talk and like express their thoughts and emotions about everything going on in the world right now, because there is a lot. So like I said, whether that be social media, word of mouth, school, I think it would be really cool to get the word of YAB out there a little bit more.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah. Yeah, Tracy, what's up?
I agree with Hannah, and I think that I would imagine there's a high percentage of people even attending this meeting that learned some things from Dana just now about what schools provide, but also rights tied to education, and it can actually close the gap of no communication or misunderstanding. So I think if anything, Maya, always inviting somebody from another discipline to these meetings could be really helpful for everybody, and then that message gets sort of conveyed out from this meeting. So I think it's really important and really positive. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for that, Tracy. So yeah, I put the YAB website in the chat, and so if you providers have any clients that you're meeting with and you think that they'd be an awesome fit for YAB, please share that website with them or give them my contact information, and we'll get them into our YAB, because you know our voices are so much stronger when there's multiple opinions and multiple voices from different experiences coming together. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing from more people, whether that be YAB or other providers or other resources that we don't know about yet. So please feel free to invite people to this meeting. You know, I think the more voices we get into this space, the better. So yeah, please feel free to invite to this meeting, invite people to YAB. And I think we can really do a lot of good if we just put our heads together. I want to give everybody a chance to kind of like say their closing statements. I know we're 2 minutes over, but if anybody has anything else to say, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I just want to thank the YAB for coming through, and I've said it before, and I think I've said it in the YAB meetings, but I really cherish and appreciate all the work that you all are doing, and This is kind of the vision of what YHDP is supposed to be. And so to see it come to fruition really feels good, and it feels like we're on the right track and doing something that really could be life-changing for a lot of people, and changing the way that we kind of encounter youth homelessness and how we address it. So I really do appreciate you coming to these meetings and now facilitating these meetings, and just bringing your passion and your experience and your truth to this. So thank you.
That means so much to me. Thank you. Thank you for all of the kudos. It means the world to me. Thank you guys.
It's been real.
Absolutely. So thank you guys.